Chapter 22. UCM Goes on the Offense. A potent mix of adrenaline and trepidation surged through each member of the UCM as they converged on the Missouri State Capitol building in Jefferson City. Every individual navigated a distinct route, acutely aware of the timing and objectives to meet their mission's critical milestones. Conversation was sparse. Instead, their minds raced with potential outcomes and challenges that lay ahead. While meticulous planning had been undertaken, they were all too aware of the old adage, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. As the Capitol building came within sight, Sergeant Smith moved from his seat to the front of the bus. He signaled for Kate, and she in turn got the men up and ready to move. "Get ready to move. We will only be stopping for 30 seconds, Kate informed them, and each was set to go. The driver pulled down a road only a block from the Capitol with plenty of cover to conceal the men as they disembarked. "Stopping in 5, the driver called out. Everyone's pulse began to race, and each could almost hear his or her own heartbeat. The driver didn't need to count down. He could see a stop sign coming up. Each person was pressed against the person in front, waiting to move. The door opened with Sergeant Smith standing behind it, and before they even came to a stop, the first 4 had already jumped. Smith didn't waste time getting out of sight and moved quickly to darkness, away from the streetlights. By the time he crossed the freshly cut grass, everyone had exited the bus. The early morning was quiet, and they were all now on the move to the Capitol building through the dark, just out of reach of the streetlights. Once close enough to see their entry point, they settled in and waited for the signal to move, checking one another's gear. The driver headed for the other end of town, where he would meet up with the other bus and the 5-ton. As he drove, Roger thought about the events to come as he took in the sights of the city, and how, thankfully, there was little traffic on the streets since it was early morning. The anticipation of what was about to take place filling his thoughts. He was going to intentionally get the cops to chase after him, while trying to outrun them in what basically amounted to a school bus. He yelled back to the fake soldiers seated on the bus, "Hold on, men, we are going to have some fun." Soon as the other 2 vehicles spotted him approaching, they began to move from the woods just outside of the city. It was time. The plan was to drive right down Missouri Boulevard, the heart of the city. Everyone agreed it was the best place to kick their plan off. They were certain to pass at least one cop. Little did they know how soon they'd pass a cop. Just as the boulevard came into sight, so did the lights from a cop car, and with those lights the mission was a go. Rogers, who had just let off Sergeant Smith and Kate, picked up the mic. "Red, red, red," he called out, setting the chain of events into action. Now it was C. Dr. Sawyer's turn to move. "Red, red, red," Sawyer confirmed, and he watched from down the street as 3 squad cars left with lights and sirens breaking the darkness and silence of the night. Sawyer waited a few minutes before having his driver start their part of the mission. Once he was sure no others were going to be joining the pursuit of the convoy, they moved. There were 8 of them in the Humvee, so things were more than a little tight, though it wasn't noticed by the speed in which they exited. Sawyer was the first to walk through the door, his team following close behind. He held up official papers to the man behind the glass of the front desk. "Open the door. This is an order from the President of the United States declaring martial law over the state of Missouri." Sawyer said it with such authority and power that the officer behind the glass didn't even notice that the paper was a supply request form from the mess hall. As soon as Sawyer stopped speaking, the door came open and his men entered. The officer behind the glass approached with more than confusion on his face. "Can I see the orders?" he asked, unsure of himself. Sawyer didn't even acknowledge his question, but asked one of his own. "How many officers are on duty, and how many are in the building?" Sawyer asked from the commanding position of parade rest. "Just myself, the jailer, and dispatch. The other officers went in pursuit of the rogue military companies spotted in town." The man had obviously never been in the military, otherwise he wouldn't be so nervous. Sawyer couldn't help grinning as he looked around the room. "After the rogue company, you say?" "Yes, sir, we spotted them just 5 minutes ago," the man replied with a little more perkiness in his voice. Sawyer's grin became even larger. "Well, isn't that interesting?" Sawyer gave a nod to his man who had come up behind the officer. With little effort, he slid his right arm under the officer's chin and locked it into the left on the other side, putting him into a hold, from which he would be unconscious within a matter of seconds. "Looks like you spotted others from the rogue company." Sawyer then turned and ordered his RTO to make the call beginning the next and most dangerous stage of the mission. "White! White! White!" he called out over the radio, knowing what was about to happen. Smith heard the transmission loud and clear. Looking over to Kate, he could see that she had heard it as well and had already given their RTO the signal to respond, and he did. "White! White! White!" Then only 2 seconds later they heard Karnik's team at the armory come over the radio. "Blue! Blue! Blue!" Everything was now in motion, and what the next few hours were to bring nobody knew. For now, Sergeant Smith knew one thing, and that was his ultimate goal: take the Capitol building and free the Lieutenant Governor. Smith gave Kate a pat on her shoulder to signal that they were moving. She in turn did the same to the next, and so forth. Smith was amazed at the lack of security around the place. Then again, it was not as if state capitals were frequently assaulted. He, like the rest, still had a hard time with the way things had escalated, but he understood the part he, Kate, and the rest of the squad were now taking in the events. Keeping to the shadow was about to become much more difficult, and Kate could see the look Smith gave her, the look saying, "Let's talk." She held her hand up for them to stay before moving over to Smith. "You see the parking entrance over there?" Smith was pointing to a paved road leading to the back just past a manned guard post. "That guard looks a lot like Mac, doesn't he? Even close to the same build." Mac was on Kate's team, the oldest man in the UCM. He had served in Vietnam. "I think I see where you are going," Kate replied, with a hint of excitement in her voice. "I have an idea." Kate turned to her team and signaled to Darian to come closer. Darian was the youngest in the UCM and was on Kate's team. Darian stayed low and moved in close to Kate and Smith in order to keep the volume of their voices down. He unhooked his M4 from his gear, which had previously belonged to his best friend and mentor, Parker. Karnik had passed Parker's gear over to Darian after the burial, and he treasured nothing more in the world than that gear. Settled close to the two others, he waited to hear what they had in store for him, and it was not a long wait. "Drop all your gear and look like a kid again." Those were not the words Darian had expected to come from Kate. He followed her orders, though, all the while hoping they would become much clearer soon. As he began the transformation, she continued, "I need you to wander up to the guard post looking for your dog, lure him out, and then we will take him down. Can you do it?" Her plan was crystal clear to Darian now, and he was more than willing to accept the mission. Soon as Darian had finished wiping the black camo paint from his face, he was ready to begin. Backtracking through the shadows, he came to and stepped out onto the street about a block down from the Capitol building. He then started walking down the street, whistling and calling out for Fido. And then he laughed a little. He was using the most common dog name ever, but why not? "Here, Fido! Where are you, Fido?" He called out all the way down the street, and even sprinted after the imaginary dog a few times, as if to catch him. Darian was so believable that Kate even caught herself looking for the dog in the direction he sprinted. "The kid is good," Kate said while shaking her head in disbelief that she had even looked for the lost dog. As Darian got closer to the guard, his acting became even better. Everyone could hear the concern in his voice over his imaginary lost dog. The guard leaned out of his shack to get a better idea of what was going on. He had heard someone coming, but hadn't been able to make out what the person had been saying. Then it became clear once he took a step outside his booth. "Here, Fido. Where are you, Fido?" "Who the hell names a dog Fido anymore?" the guard asked himself. He saw the boy sprint to the side of the drive. Well, at least he sees him, he thought, and then began to walk over to give the kid assistance. It never dawned on him that it was almost 5 in the morning, and some kid was out here looking for his lost dog. "What's he look like, son?" the guard called out, happy to assist. Darian jumped back a little as if the guard had startled him. With a little touch of fake fear in his voice, Darian spoke. "We parked up the road to let the dumb dog use the bathroom and it ran off. I just saw it too." He pointed up into the dark area of the shrubs. The guard looked and couldn't see anything but darkness. "You sure he is in there?" the guard asked, as he pulled a flashlight from his belt and shined it just beyond the shrubs. Instantly the guard knew from the 5 rifle barrels pointing at him that there was no Fido to find. Sergeant Smith looked intently through the glass of his optics at the red dot he held positioned at the center of the security guard's chest. He waited for the guard to go for his weapon and prayed that he wouldn't. With this many rifles trained on him and only 3 feet away, it would be certain death. Darian felt a little sorrow for tricking the guard, who only wanted to help a kid find his dog. Once he concluded that the guard wasn't going to do anything stupid, he turned to him. "I am going to remove your sidearm, and then we can have a little talk, okay?" Darian asked in a confident but otherwise soothing tone. Not wanting to make any excessive moves or noise, the guard merely nodded in compliance. Few people would want to do either of those when at this end of what he could only assume were loaded rifles. He could feel his pistol being drawn from its holster and his radio being detached from his belt. That wasn't all he felt. Other than the items being removed from his person, he started feeling pressure building in his ears and a tingling sensation moving throughout his body. He then found himself very curious as to how they were slowly turning out all the lights from all around him, till it was as if he was looking down a tunnel. With her weapon trained on the guard, Kate watched closely for any aggressive movement. She knew from experience that things could get quickly out of hand. Then she saw aggressive movement and tightened up on her rifle, pulling it just a little snugger into her shoulder. His upstretched arms were ever so slowly moving downward. She couldn't believe somebody would be so stupid to go for a gun with so many firearms already pointed at him, especially after his had already been removed. She centered the red dot on his chest, and her finger began to exert more pressure upon the trigger. The lower his arms became, the more pressure she put on the trigger. Then she heard him speak. "How are you turning out the That was as far as the guard made it before Kate, with her rifle in hand and an expression of disbelief on her face, watched him land in the bushes directly between them. She then looked at Smith, who had the same expression. It could even be seen through his camouflage face paint. "Did he just faint?" Smith asked, while attempting to hold back the laughter. He then looked back down at the man lying in the bushes. "Let's get him over here and awake," Smith said, as he reached down to grab the unconscious guard's arms to drag him over. "Put him up against the tree," he instructed Kate. Both of them still couldn't believe what had just happened. "Lights, lights," the guard mumbled. "What the hell is he talking about?" Darian asked, as he watched Kate splash more water on the guard's face. "Stop," the guard said as he came back to a state of awareness. "What did you do to me? I was cooperating," he exclaimed as if somebody had rendered him unconscious. "You fainted," Max said to him from the darkness. "The hell I did. We did nothing. I saw it many times in Nam. Hell, even did it myself once. That is how I know. It happens. Now let's move on." Mac, being the oldest of them, had seen enough in his life that somebody fainting was no longer that funny to him. "Who are you guys?" the guard asked. "We are the ones asking questions. Where are they keeping the lieutenant governor?" Smith asked with composure and a commanding tone. The reply in return was one mixed with sarcasm and confusion. "The lieutenant governor? He isn't here."